Welcome to the first round of Honest Shots. My name is Envision, and I'm here to speak my mind, as well as try to achieve my goal of making 100 videos of this series, consisting of reviews, countdowns, and etc. on different films and TV series. And to start off this big behemoth, I'll be reviewing Nickelodeon's Crybaby Lane. I said I would review anything from popular to obscure, and nothing could be more obscure than something that was lost for over a decade. But is it any good, or is it any bad? There's only one way for me to find out. Let's dig 6 feet deep into Crybaby Lane. A Crybaby Lane is a horror TV movie created by Nickelodeon and directed by Peter Lauer in October of 2000, about a pair of brothers who accidentally release a curse from the spirit of a separated conjoined twin on their hometown, and a strange undertaker they're friends with has the solution to stop it. The film was never shown since, and until it was rebroadcasted during the same month in 2011, it was considered lost media. There has never been a concrete answer on why it was unavailable to begin with. Some say it was too frightening for kids to watch, while others say that it was just forgotten and not popular enough to keep going. Or as I like to call it, not SpongeBob. Nickelodeon presents Keenan and Kel. Sheesh, as if Good Burger wasn't terrifying enough. The film begins with a narrator telling a disturbing story about the fate of a pair of conjoined twins, involving dismemberment, confinement, and illnesses. But it's rated PG, so have at it, kids.
Due to a rare embryonic mutation, the infants joined as one flesh and came into this world freaks. And the farmer hid them away. As they grew, it became clear that one was good and the other was evil.
But sadly, the twins didn't live too long due to a liver illness. And what did the farmer do?
Not wanting to expose his shame, the farmer decided to unjoin the bodies.
Boy, I'm really starting to feel for any conjoined twins who accidentally came across this movie. Seriously, if this film really wasn't lost due to being too scary, then the kids who watched it back then must have been hardcore as all hell. The story ends with the separated twins being buried at different locations, with the good twin at a normal cemetery and the evil one left at a field called Crybaby Lane, and that legend states that people can hear the crying sounds of vengeance from the evil twin at that area during the night. We then cut to the present at a funeral home where the narrator, an undertaker named Mr. Bennett, played by Frank Langella of all people, wraps up his story that he was telling our main hero, Andrew, played by Jace Blankford, and his older brother Carl, played by Trey Rogers. There's also Bennett's assistant, Kenneth, played by Lark Spies, but for now he's not important. Fun fact, Mr. Bennett was originally going to be played by Tom Waits, but Nickelodeon wanted a more popular actor, so they went with Langella instead. The boys head home and get reprimanded by their mother, played by Anne Lang, thinking Bennett is a bad influence on them and wants them to stay away, causing a rift between them, with Carl being tired of Andrew being too cowardly. After venting about being afraid to his friend Hall, Andrew decides to prove himself and joins Carl to prank a couple of girls by scaring them with a fake seance at the cemetery. Not bad. Really? Out of all the sound effects you could use, you picked the most generic stock ones? These girls must be bigger worms than Andrew, especially Kathy, played by Sherry Dratch. I wonder if there's a romance in the works. They all arrive, and despite a shaky start, the seance is a big success.
Cut it out, Carl.
But it sounds like it worked better than Carl thought, and everyone books it, unaware that the town will soon be affected by a powerful and deadly curse. One Goosebumps reference at a time. The next morning, Bennett prepares for work alongside his other assistant, Gary, played by Gary Perez. But both notice the aftermath of the seance and find themselves in trouble with the dog from earlier.
When I say so, run.
Unable to outrun it, Gary is out of commission. Not that I feel that bad for him though, but we'll get into that later. Andrew and Carl are still reeling with last night, only to get an unexpected visit from Bennett, who suspects they have something to do with what's going on, much to their mother's disappointment.
I guess you're really upset with me about your mom's funeral, huh? Well, look, it was an honest mistake, Anne. She wasn't presentable.
Wasn't presentable? What did you do? Send her body off to the army for explosion testing? I swear that actually happened. As things start to get more creepy, Andrew heads outside to see Kathy, but it sounds like she and her friends are possessed hooligans at the moment. After a near train incident, Carl gets transported to the cemetery where Kathy and her bright-eyed friends are waiting for him, and then he gets sucked into the ground. This is where we meet one of the twins, specifically the evil one. In a shocking twist of fate, they were switched at death. Carl reappears and leads Andrew to where he believes Kathy is, with Andrew unaware that he's possessed. They make it to a barn, but a few strange occurrences chase Andrew back into town, and barely clothed if things weren't bad enough. After pulling himself together and witnessing a boat arson, he heads to the funeral home where Bennett finishes an arrangement with another family. With the father played by stand-up comic Jim Gaffigan, he explains everything that happened, and Bennett suspects that the strange activity has something to do with the Crybaby Lane story from earlier and provides more context. It turns out the twins really were put in different graves, with the good one at the field and the bad one at the cemetery, and that their seance might have unleashed the bad one's spirit, possessing the whole town.
And I think everything it comes across turns evil.
You're telling me one story, and now you're telling me another story.
I'm the one who separated the bodies.
Looks like the mother character really was onto something about him after all. Speaking of which, before they head out to raise the good twin spirit, she finds Andrew and takes him back home so Carl, still possessed, can apologize for the pranks.
She's a one-of-a-kind, open-minded, good-natured, line-dancing, witty, pretty, fun-loving gal.
So the bastard was faking it the whole time! This is what happens when your dog attack scenes are not graphic enough. Bennett comes over in time for Gary to resume his facade, which he makes up for when he reveals a way to handle the curse.
They say every grave has like a weed or a root that grows out of the soul of the dead guy. If you cut the weed, you cut the soul loose, okay?
You cut the soul loose.
Before he sets off, Hall, also possessed, beats him with his lightsaber, which actually knocks him out. Carl tries to get Andrew while he's showering, which turns out to be a diversion to sneak out and get back to Bennett to resume the plan. Still winded from earlier, he tells Andrew to go to Crybaby Lane and cut the weed from the good twins' remains before passing out,
I'll take the check.
leaving Kenneth to take over. I won't lie, I actually thought he died just by being whacked with a plastic toy a few times. It would have been a pretty embarrassing way to go. Anyway, they drive off but get chased by a rogue police sheriff. Oh, and he's also possessed.
You can't outrun a police car in a hearse?
GTA players would say otherwise. And to make things worse, Kenneth doesn't even have a license or any idea of where they're even going.
You are an idiot!
They lose him and thankfully end up closer than expected, but face even more problems on the way. The tractor crashes into the hearse with Kenneth inside, so Andrew goes solo, only to encounter Kathy's gang. He gets away and makes it to the grave and tries to get the weed, but the evil twin transports him to the cemetery and pulls him down under. He evades the evil twin, finds the good twin in his weed, don't take that out of context, and pulls it out just in time before the grave caves. No one is possessed anymore, and everything is back to normal. Andrew gives Kathy a flower from the grave. I'm pretty sure that's desecration. Kenneth survives the tractor crash. Carl has more respect for his brother. And Bennett is back to tell more ghost stories.
Tell the one about the time we embalmed the guy that wasn't all the way dead.
Being a horror movie, you can expect there to be a creepy atmosphere, especially one that takes place at night most of the time. And Crybaby Lane, while not exorcist levels of creepiness, still delivers. The setting has a pretty foreboding vibration to it, even making something like a train crossing look unnerving. It always feels as if something's always off about it, even at daytime. It's like a neighborhood in October without Halloween decorations. It's not the fun kind of scary, it's just off-putting. I like some of the haunting sound effects, such as the crying twin voices, And the ones that happen whenever we see someone with those bright possessed eyes. As well as the main theme tune, which sounds a bit like the Cramps. And the one that plays when the curse is lifted.
You okay, sport?
I think I chipped a tooth.
I think I lost my mind.
While not the most complex character or anything, I like Andrew enough. He puts in a lot of effort trying to prove that he's not scared of everything, though he is, giving him a rebellious feel, and I actually started to feel concerned when he was almost buried alive near the ending. Carl, while seeming like a typical bully sibling at first, is not all that bad. He gives Andrew a hard time out of wanting him to build up some courage, even if it's something as simple as talking to a girl from the heart.
You see, men do not make scripts. Men do not fear phones. Men take what they want and leave the others bleeding on the turnbuckle.
And will take any opportunity to help him do so without hesitation.
Carl, I'll make it up to you, right?
Good man, Andrew. Here's a plan.
And Jace Blankford and Trey Rogers do a pretty good job with what they're given. Frank Langella is great as Bennett. He gives off this mixture of being mature and wise, yet pretty mysterious. He isn't afraid of telling these dark and gruesome stories to kids and takes more pleasure out of his job than your average funeral home director. Don't take that out of context either. He does great. I don't think I saw a bad performance from anybody.
I don't always do whatever Carl says. I get Carl. No way!
The train scene was pretty suspenseful, the boat explosion looked awesome, the police chase was entertaining, the tractor scene got ripped off by cars, and every scene with the evil twin is just as ominous as you could imagine. Right down to the design of the twin himself and Andrew's near burial. But by far, my favorite part is the beginning where we hear the twins' story. Everything presented is near perfect. Which is what I'd call perfection if it actually existed. The black and white imagery, the haunting cries, and Langella's deadpan narration, it's oh so enjoyably creepy. And it's also where the horror peaks for me, with the evil twin scenes at second place. As scary as everything I mentioned earlier is, the effects of the curse itself are pretty underutilized most of the time, and are never really brought to their full potential. I mean, the curse is able to possess people and turn them evil, as well as cause hallucinations. There's a lot to be taken advantage of, but for most of the time my reaction to what it does could be summed up as, that's it? That's what the curse does to people? It just turns most of them into teenage delinquents! The really creepy stuff doesn't happen too often, and some of the scenes that should be scary don't really come across it that much, like the dog attack that looks more like the dog is playing with him than attacking him, or when Andrew gets surrounded by Kathy's gang and has to fight one of them when he has plenty of room to bolt, and he takes down his attacker just by tripping her. I know the film is rated PG, but when the very beginning details the story of conjoined twins who were sealed from the world their whole lives by their father, died from a shared liver disease, and were dismembered by a saw just to place them in separate graves, coupled with how it's all presented, almost everything else feels like a downgrade. I've seen creepier facial expressions from Avatar: The Last Airbender. While I like Andrew, Carl, Bennett, the evil twin, as well as Kenneth a bit, the other characters are pretty forgettable and uninteresting. Hall only has 4 scenes and only impacts the 3rd, leaving him sidelined for the rest of the story.
You want the ring, Baggins? You have to go to me first. Come and get it.
Oh, I'll get that ring. And the heavyweight championship belt, too!
Kathy doesn't do much either. She's Andrew's love interest and serves as further motivation for him to gain courage just to interact with her, but she doesn't have much involvement in the plot for me to care, making the romance feel shoved in and unnecessary. Maybe I would think otherwise if she joined Andrew to stop the curse instead of being possessed. While her concern is understandable, the mother is unhelpful and pretty miserable. When she's not fearful of her sons, she just seems frustrated or arrogant, and she's written out of the story halfway through. The father's not much better. Gary's okay, but he doesn't do that much for me either. While we're on the topic, I don't remember much of the music either. Also, this movie is a comedy as well, and I didn't even know that it was one on first viewing. I personally thought it was more dreary than funny, and I don't think I laughed once. There's really not much left for me to say. Parts of the film definitely intrigue me enough, but they're just parts, and I don't think it takes enough risk to seem that interesting overall, and the side characters' underwhelming curse abilities don't help. As lost media projects go, I think this film was a lot more interesting when it stayed lost. There was a time when this was considered one of the holy grails of lost media, one where some people even believed it never existed, and I can commend it for that, but on its own, it's just a decent horror flick for kids that when it amused me, it really amused me, but when it didn't, it really didn't. I like the main characters, Frank Langella's performance, the 2 tracks I mentioned earlier, and especially the backstory at the beginning, but its boring side characters, shoehorned romance element, and most of the creep factor never living up to the opening bring it down for me. It's one of those projects where I'm glad I watched it, but don't feel like seeing it again. Got to add that to the pile. I'm giving Crybaby Lane a 6.5 out of 10. Kids will definitely get scared from it, but for anyone else, it might be hit or miss after the opening. But what do you think? What are your honest shots about Crybaby Lane? I'll see you lot again for round 2. But until then, blessed are the subjective. Thanks for watching.